knows who gave the orders. No one asks about the crime. No one looks behind the curtain. And no one questions why. The only time we got is right about now. I cross my heart, I take the vow, I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Tonight's the test, tonight's the time. I am the punishment that fits the crime. I'll break the bricks, I'll pick the locks. I don't got nothing, but I'll give what I got. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end.
Good evening. Welcome to Conspiracy Cafe. I'm your host, George Freund. We're with you now. We're with you to the end. It's election day. We won't be able to live stream, so it'll be past election day before we can get into the meat of what we have to say. Although everything is up in the air. Everything's up in the air here in Toronto at that channel. Downtown Bay and Dundas. Broadcasting to the world, trying to change the world the best we can. Even before I come here, we look at the news. There's already reports of voting machines being tampered with and doing things they're not exactly supposed to do. At least not for you, the voter, but for the person who owns the machines, whether it be the Romney camp or the Obama camp. They're performing very, very, very well, let me tell you. We used to have a saying when Bush was in elections, because it rhymed better, and there was a lot of allegations about corruption in these voting machines. They've been corrupted since there's been voting machines, and even in the paper ballot days, according to Vote Scam, the website and the book, these elections have not been fair in any way, shape, or form for pretty much the most of my lifetime. But my saying was, it doesn't matter what button you push, you voted for Bush. And then the same holds true with Romney. We'll go to this little 18-second clip of someone taking a film of his turn at the ballot box. There's just a small little glitch there as you know, he pushes the button and gets his Obama vote turned into a Romney vote. So something I just find absolutely just despicable, really, is the fact that these people have absolutely no respect for the individual voter. So even though you could want to be in a race and you'd want to win the race and all this sort of thing, and maybe you think that, well, perhaps yours is the best. You're the best candidate, you have the best platform. But by the same token, do you really have the right to take away the vote from another person? That's something that I just find absolutely, totally despicable. Because, as it all comes to say, the most important thing is that we're standing up for people to have the right to choose. And then to just totally throw this away and destroy this so that people don't have the right to choose is absolutely despicable. So even if you totally disagree with me, even if we're totally at opposite ends of the political spectrum, I should be respecting and safeguarding your right to choose in your vote, even if it goes against what I think and what I believe and what I would like to see. It's just essential in a system like the United States. But it's a hard lesson that we're going to have to learn and learn and learn. A lot of the people that I've seen, vacillating about this election, like it's some great and wonderful thing, just don't seem to catch on that the game's fixed completely and totally. You don't really have something to pick from. Both of the major candidates have been pre-selected for you, so it doesn't matter which one wins. The political economic power trust wins every time. They've marginalized all the other candidates. If I find my picture that I was hoping to use at this point, I'll show it later in the show, because BBC put up a news article about the election, and they showed a ballot, well, not necessarily a ballot, but a scorecard of who's voting for who, and they actually had the Green Party and the Libertarian and such extra parties on this count, so that you could see that they exist. And it just boggles my mind what people do when they go into the voting booth. They see these other names. Don't they wonder, like, how come I've never heard of these people before? Why weren't they ever on TV? How come they weren't on the debate? How come they're never in the newspaper? Why does no one ask these questions? And then you start to, just even at a low level, start to think a little bit and start to say, well, the game's rigged, it's fixed. They don't want me to vote for these people. That's why they get no coverage. So I'm going to vote for them anyway for spite. One thing I did like, it's a question I had and I didn't have an answer because we don't use these machines much in Canada, thank God, and I'm not that familiar with them. But at the bottom of the list, you could see another blank space for write-in, where you could write in a candidate, because that's one of your most basic fundamental rights, as well as the ability to pick anybody outside of whatever they picked for you, whatever parties are running. So Ron Paul might be a very successful write-in candidate, even at this late hour. Not that that's going to change anything, but as a sign of protest, it's a very useful way to use your vote. The only downside is when you push that button, at least in a Romney machine, it's still going to be a vote for Romney. And if you're in an Obama machine, well, then it's probably going to be a vote for Obama no matter what button you push. And that's pretty much, they unplugged this machine, as I understand it, took it apart and said, we'll fix it. No worries, and get it back online. But of course, if anybody else in a hurry voted that way, their vote was misdirected and gone somewhere else. Of course, the best thing to do is take it apart yourself with an axe and just smash the living crap out of it. Have your video as backup to say that this machine is crooked and we've just taken it out of service, and maybe we have some other options here. But that's the despicableness of the power grabbers. Of course, now that it's election day, a lot of what happened in the United States with this giant hurricane is going to be swept aside and forgotten, as people will, this will probably fight about this election now for days on end. It's so close. Who knows what could happen? Will there be court litigation? Will it be going to the Congress and the Senate to pick the president and the vice president? We don't know at this early hour. It'll probably be a good clue by the time we have the show posted. And what's happened, and one of the biggest false flag attacks on the United States since 9/11, was probably bigger as far as monetary damage and overall damage, much lower death count with this Hurricane Sandy. As we watch this video we have posted on the website conspiracy-cafe.com, Weather Warfare by the History Channel. No mistake about it. They've been doing weather warfare for a long time. This goes into great detail. There is no conspiracy. It's all facts, scientific facts, facts that just aren't put before you, or if they are, perhaps you're not that interested. Maybe as a channel, History Channel, just doesn't go that far, and a lot of people just wouldn't watch it, even though it's so important to see what the result was of manufacturing the storm. And the way that they show it in this documentary is it's so easy to steer a storm. It's almost child's play. And the big question is, well, if you have this technology, why wouldn't you use it to save lives? Why do you use it to take them apart? Well, obviously because we're playing world global domination, and the power structure has to win. Has to win to get Obama elected. That was his trump card. his little 9/11, something no one could ever make allegations against or prove. That's something they say in that video very, very clearly, is you just can't lay a handle exactly on who did it. Although we've laid handles on that. In this little image here, we have a classic image of the American flag. Reminds me of a lot of an American flag you'd see in a war. And basically, if they were hit with a weather weapon, you were in a war. Civil war, practically. And that would be, or should be, one of the greatest shots of an American flag in combat. So I saved it on my own photo page because it'll probably disappear. Many, many images of the American flag are just historically forever. Iwo Jima probably being the image of all time. So by copying the Star-Spangled Banner here to give it a little oomph, maybe a lot of people in the Northeast can't see or get online yet even still. But there are many fights and many struggles. They go on whether you know it or not. One of the big struggles was this weather weapon. So we find out in 1997 they had a drill, and that a certain individual saved all his material. They had a Hurricane Sandy named after a 1938 hurricane after a person named Sandy. It had the same approach. These are older computer graphics, so they're not as pretty. And they went live and did it. So the one up here says very clearly this is a drill. And then of course, by the time we wave this flag again, it's no longer a drill, it's a fait accompli. You've been knocked out. And the place that was knocked out the worst was Staten Island. People were told to evacuate, they didn't. That's a big mistake. And then they were in a situation where they were in dire need of help because they weren't prepared enough. You can never be prepared enough to face a major disaster. You can never have enough food, you can never have enough clean water, you can never have enough, you know, whatever you're going to need as far as something dry like blankets. But when you're, you know, basically underwater, there isn't going to be anything dry, and you may not be able to get at your own supplies even if you've put them away. And that's something a lot of people don't consider, is they do prepare and they have a lot of stuff, but it's only in one location, and the location is destroyed. So the materials you buy are either waterlogged, blown away, blown up, burned. You just don't have them anymore. They're gone. So even though you prepared and you thought a lot about what you were going to do, you don't have a backup plan. You had one plan, the plan was defeated, and then you're helpless. One of the biggest things you have to be prepared for is you have to be prepared to be without electricity for days, weeks, maybe months, depending on what type of emergency you have to deal with. And in the wintertime, when you get into days and weeks, you're in a life-threatening situation. So one thing I can hardly recommend to people to have, outside of the classic wood stove and such like that, fireplaces, is a kerosene heater. Doesn't require electricity, puts out a lot of heat. You don't have to burn it 24 hours a day. You can use it for a couple hours in a place it burns clean, so it can be used indoors, where a lot of other heating devices may give off fumes that can kill you. So it's really high on the list. And these hurricane lamps, or just the old-fashioned gas table lamps that use kerosene fuel as well, give off a lot of heat and also give off a lot of light. So at least you can get by on the bare bones in a situation like that. We always harp on having the marine radio so you can get in touch with the Coast Guard, or a good CB. You just can't go wrong. Phone lines are down, the cell grid's down. It's like message in a bottle time, people, or you got to have a carrier pigeon. So getting into radio is very, very important. Find out where your local radio shop is. People who deal with, you know, a little better end of stuff, so that you can communicate with the world when you have to. Because there were people here, there's like the worst story of Staten Island was a woman who lost her 2 children. They were drowned. They were pulled from her grasp. She had no idea how much water she'd have to go through. She had a big 4x4 Ford Explorer or something like that, but probably had no clue what a snorkel pack is. And once too much water got on it, the vehicle stalled out. She tried to hold her children. When you have big waves of water coming at you like that, even children are going to end up having the equivalent weight of like 200, 300, 400 pounds, depending on how much pressure is on them. And there's no way you can hold it. And they lost their lives over that. One of the biggest things for people in situations where a disaster is going to come, if you got kids, get the hell out. You know it's coming. You're adults, you're big, you're strong, you can do what you want to do if you want to take a chance. But when you're dealing with the little ones, you always got to err on the side of caution and just get the hell out. Go to some kind of higher or safe ground if you know it's going to come. A lot of times these things just come out of the blue and you don't expect it. No one would expect that Irene was a dry run rehearsal. And then the next one was the real deal. So as it says in the Star-Spangled Banner, "Oh, thus be it ever, when free men shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us and a nation." And you have to stand for something or face desolation if you just let the New World Order crowd have their way with you. We have a smoking gun. There's pretty much no mistake that we are dealing with a major weather war. There's so much evidence that's out there. So many people are informed. So many people do their own research. So many people are looking for the signs, and this is one of them. This is a microwave anomaly coming across the radar screen, going straight at the storm while it's off the coast of Florida as it's rising up. The date on this is 27th of October. You can't get a better smoking gun than that. This is a radar anomaly. When Hurricane Irene was around, you can see this white circle. That's the activation of HAARP. HAARP is color-coded, so you can tell what and how much you're getting. But when it gets so strong, past the highest color, it goes white, because they don't have a color for anything higher, and that's why this one's white, as you'll see when we get to the end. This is Irene a year before, and you just see small bits of microwave bursts coming into the storm. That was a dress rehearsal, a dry run, getting ready. And then this is captured, a more modern version of Sandy with bursts of HAARP. And then this is just totally bizarre. A physicist from NASA took these images around Huntsville, Alabama, 2 days after seeing the strange rings around the afternoon sun. So frequently people can see sundogs in the Arctic, because of course that's where they use HAARP the most, but there are other anomalies that are more natural, like the northern lights, that can force the atmosphere into various shapes. But this has everything in it. These things were seen all over the United States, so there's pretty much no mistake that somebody turned on something. And the net effect is you see probably what's left of chemtrails being shaped and formed into other sizes. Remember when you were a small child and you were in a science class and you were going to do an experiment on magnetism, you'd have iron filings on top of something and you'd put a magnet underneath, and all the iron filings would take a shape of the lines of flux of the magnet. This is the same type of effect, but this has everything in it. So I think we can say without a doubt that we're dealing with a major created storm. I've seen these effects myself Not with this hurricane, because of course we were clouded over up here in southern Ontario for the whole time. But way back in another event, when there was the tsunami on Boxing Day that wiped out the Indian Ocean and vicinity, I saw these effects in the sky exactly 1 week before and the day of, and I photographed them both. And even though we were so far away from the event, I was mesmerized to see two suns in the sky. So what I saw was the sun and the sundog. And then on the day of the event, while I was looking at this so-called sundog, it just disappeared. And it reappeared 90 degrees from the horizon I was looking at. And I got a picture of it across a farmer's field. Just instantly, it just changed direction. Amazing stuff. These are images of the Northern Lights. This one is around Antioch, Illinois. It is a beautiful picture. Beautiful sky. But it is very unusual to get the Northern Lights that far south. I've only seen them come that far south once in my lifetime. And this is a picture of it from Yellowknife in Canada's Arctic. And that's just mind-boggling. So I guess you get by. You're not bored in your 24-hour darkness when winter comes in. This is an amazing effect. Flight attendants were reporting that they had unusual experiences in the jet stream, a lot of turbulence, things being broken and smashed around. NASA recorded strange sounds of plasma coming from the ionosphere. And as we learned in this weather warfare video from the History Channel, ionized plasma is a fundamental in weather warfare, in making weather. And NASA recorded it. So there's little up to the imagination. One of the other things that's just very, very bizarre is one of this show's most ardent supporters and followers is in New York, and I was quite worried about her. And just out of the blue, I figure, well, I'll look for damage because I know her street and see if, it's underwater or there's something wrong. And, didn't find anything. What I did find was an advertisement for her apartment, empty, vacant, looking to be rented out again. So somebody was listening and got the hell out of Dodge. This individual's contributed a lot of money to keep this show up and running over the years, and it's been greatly appreciated. And it's nice to see the difference between the people who don't have any time to look into broader issues and the people who do. One was a survivor, and a whole lot weren't, because they have no understanding. The world moves at the speed of the predator, not the prey. If you can't catch up, it doesn't care. You got to catch up on your own. If people laugh at you because you say something that they respond with the C word, the conspiracy word, don't be afraid. As long as you're alive, high and dry and safe. So I got a clue watching or listening to a Toronto radio show, A View from Space, with Gary Bell, a show I cut my teeth on many years ago and raised the bar very, very high. But he made all kinds of allegations about NASA being involved in this event. He didn't back them up with any facts, at least not enough facts to make even a prima facie case. So I started taking it up from there. And I'll tell you something. There's a lot of strange anomalies. One of the biggest, of course, is he mentioned there were astronauts sent up prior to this event to crew the International Space Station. That is correct. On October 23rd, days before Sandy got out of hand, 3 more crew members were added as a regular rotation. Kevin Ford, an American, 2 Russian cosmonauts, Oleg Novitsky and Evgeny Tarelkin, all former Air Force pilots. We have to speculate if they're weather warfare specialists. When they do these types of operations, they're compartmentalized to such a degree that you may not have the slightest clue. You may just have a tiny little role, and then there's 100 other different roles that are played to make the operation happen, all completely separate, distinct, covered by national security. And maybe your role was just very, very simple. You opened the fridge door. Couldn't ever have anything suspicious about that. But then there's 99 other people to do something else in relation to you opening the fridge door. And maybe somebody put poison gas in a large experiment or put anthrax in something, and you had no idea. You just opened the door and something happened. It's that easy. In a statement in one of the media, and I have great luck finding related articles, Mr. Ford stated that the space station would enter the utilization phase. We have a link to the article if it's not taken down. So it's going live. This whole concept now of supporting the International Space Station is very different because the shuttles are gone. So there's a company, a private company called SpaceX, owned by PayPal's Elon Musk. And he's designed a capsule that looks like one of the old 60s capsules, like the Mercury or Gemini. It's called the Dragon, and it supplies the International Space Station under contract. It was supposed to deliver an Orbcomm communication satellite, but something went wrong. It has 9 Merlin engines on the rocket to launch it, and one of them failed. Because that one engine failed, the load couldn't properly be compensated, and the satellite was dropped off in a much lower orbit for some strange reason, never to be recovered by human hands again. The ultimate murder weapon. On the link, it talks about what the orbits are, so if you're a specialist or you understand that a little more than I do, you could probably even plot or figure this out. They allege that this satellite fell to Earth and was burned up. Maybe it has been by now, but it doesn't mean it didn't go to work. They put the antennas up and started operating this satellite, even though they knew it was in the wrong place. And when you look at what this satellite is, it looks like this. So if I was going to be, as an idiot, just saying, you know, what would I draw with pen and ink if someone told me to draw a laser or some sort of high energy weapon and put it in orbit, what would it look like? I'd probably say it would look a lot like that. So what is Orbcomm really? Or at least the version that has been destroyed and burned up. And then Orbcomm covers the Earth in this pattern. For whatever reason. Get a lot of flooding in Africa. Nigeria is supposed to be really underwater this summer. They're in a red zone, not a good thing. But we see way up here in the New England coast, that Orbcomm does cover that part of the globe. They were taken up by these astronauts in a Soyuz spacecraft because America doesn't have anything to carry them up with anymore. They made a point of the fact, and it's reading in the Twilight language or just reading in, basically a substitution code of some sort or another, that there were 32 Japanese Medaka fish, which don't mean much to us over here in this part of the pond, but they're more popularly known as the killifish. So the language implies to a degree that they're on a kill mission. In the Japanese art form anime, like an animated cartoon type of film, there's a popular version called the Medaka box. It involves experiments on students of exceptional abilities called abnormals. In order to mass produce abnormals, they are put through vicious tests that result in many deaths, like dodging hurricanes. One of the spokesmen that I found in one of my articles was Charles Bolden of NASA. He's former pilot from the Vietnam era, commander in Operation Desert Thunder. He's flown in many space shuttles. He was a specialist in using Atlas I, the Atmospheric Laboratory for Applications in Science. So with that experience, that puts him on the short list of being a mission commander, even in a covert weather warfare mission. He was appointed by President Obama to his high position in NASA. And operating in this Atlas program, where we see the patch and the various astronauts, he's right here at the bottom. Now he's at the top. He was the first to fire a beam of electrons to stimulate man-made auroral discharge. The use of plasma beams can stimulate the weather. He's the man. And he's in charge. In another article, they talked about the fact that the crew that were on board already, Sunita Williams, Akihito Hoshide, had to go outside to deploy a radiator because one of their radiators was damaged. They had to pull one out that hasn't been used since 2007 when it was put away by Williams as well. Or, as we read through the Covert Arts and Science, was this a cover story? And that perhaps the radiator is really a piece of equipment for the command and control center of this operation, perhaps the International Space Shuttle. It's not like we can go up and knock on the door and serve them with a warrant. This is the SpaceX capsule next to the International Space Station, being held on to by the Canadarm. And this diagram shows the HARP active. But again, as these colors go from, yellow, orange, this pinky color, that's the highest level. And it can't go any higher than 10 on this scale. When it does go higher, it turns white. So we see where it turned white. Right over the target city, New York. There is no mistake. I think we have our case well laid out here. And just to add a little more to it, this is the abstract for the patent for HARP from August 13th, 1991. Of course, it's been taken down from being online, and a good researcher has gone through the Wayback Machine website to find archived material online. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Let's see what we have here. Let's play the Earth song. This is what NASA recorded.
The Sound of Earth Song, presented by Science at NASA. In space, they say, no one can hear you scream. Nobody ever said anything about singing, though. A NASA spacecraft has just beamed back a beautiful song sung by our own planet. It's called Chorus, explains Craig Kletzing of the University of Iowa. This is one of the clearest examples we've ever heard. Chorus is an electromagnetic phenomenon caused by plasma waves in Earth's radiation belts. For years, ham radio operators on Earth have been listening to them from afar. Now, NASA's twin radiation belt storm probes are traveling through the region of space where Chorus actually comes from, and the recordings are out of this world. This is what the radiation belts would sound like to a human being if we had radio antennas for ears, says Kletzing, whose team at the University of Iowa built the Emphasis, electric and magnetic field instrument suite and integrated science receiver, used to pick up the signals. He's careful to point out that these are not acoustic waves of the kind that travel through the air of our planet. Chorus is made of radio waves that oscillate at acoustic frequencies between 0 and 10 kilohertz. The long antennas of the radiation belt storm probes are perfect for detecting these kinds of waves. Chorus emissions are front and center for the storm probe mission, says Kletzing. They are thought to be one of the most important waves for energizing the electrons that make up the outer radiation belt. In particular, chorus might be responsible for so-called killer electrons, high-energy particles that can endanger both satellites and astronauts. Most electrons in the radiation belts are harmless, with too little energy to do damage to human or electronic systems. But sometimes these electrons catch a chorus wave, like a surfer riding a wave on Earth, and gain enough energy to become dangerous. The radiation belt storm probes are on a mission to find out for sure. The production of killer electrons is a matter of much debate, and chorus waves are only one possibility, notes Storm Probe's mission scientist Dave Siebeck. Launched in August 2012, the two probes are orbiting inside the radiation belts, sampling electromagnetic fields, counting the number of energetic particles, and listening to plasma waves of many frequencies. We hope to gather enough data to solve the mystery once and for all, says Siebeck. At the moment, the spacecraft are still undergoing their 60-day checkout phase before the main mission begins. So far, things are checking out very well. One of the things we noticed right away is how clear the chorus sounds in the recording, notes Kletzing. That's because our data is sampled at 16 bits, the same as a CD, which has not been done before in the radiation belts. This makes the data very high quality and shows that our instrument is very, very healthy. Eventually, Kletzing hopes to release unprecedented stereo recordings of Earth's chorus. We have 2 spacecraft with 2 receivers, he says, so a stereo recording is possible. Such a recording would not only sound wonderful, but also have real scientific value. One of the things we don't know is how broad the region is over which chorus occurs. The widely separated stereo capability of the storm probes will give us the ability to figure this out, he explains. With a 2-year mission planned for the storm probes, the Earth song is just getting started. For more weird and wonderful sounds from space, stay tuned to science.nasa.gov.
Indeed. I hope you made note of the fact that they said that they had these probes launched in August 2012 with a 60-day shakedown, which allows them to be fully operational to record everything that happened or command and control everything that happened by mid-October or late October, but well in time for the end of October for this event, the storm of the century. One of the other videos we have that goes along with this, and I guess we'll play it too just to archive this material in case it disappears, so that at least there's another source for it, is some of the strange sky phenomena that was seen across the United States.
In Roanoke, Virginia, there's the first layer, and there's the upper layer. They've been extremely busy here today. With the hurricane coming and everything, somebody's been real busy here.
Either we're going to be sucked.
Can you videotape it maybe?
That's what I'm trying to do, is I can't see it though.
What's causing this shit?
That's just strange, man. It's slowly going away.
Quick add on to my weather share. We have a super bright sundog on the horizon. I just showed you the sun setting. This is 10 minutes later. And nice big fat chemtrail. Geoengineering our storm. And I believe that's a trail here also.
I think that's the sun rays.
No, well that one there, I'm not sure about this one. But over here, that's definitely a chemtrail. I don't think it's the rays.
What's it?
Put that ball down. Want to get a book?
That's crazy, man.
Get that, Mom. Look at my video.
It's like some kind of, what's some things called, man?
Huh?
What's some things called? Those triangles in point lightning school?
A prism?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Man, when you gonna show me some stuff with that Pro Tools, man?
I'm telling you, whenever you want to, man, I can show you something. Just let me know.
In this video because there's a ring around the sun. Now keep in mind, Hurricane Sandy is supposed to be on her way here, and I don't know anything what to expect about it.
few things like that, that would probably be the most amazing thing you'd ever have seen in your life, and you'd never forget it. And that's why we took a little bit of the time to allow it to be recorded here as well, so that other people can see it and share it. These anomalies were seen over several days all over the United States, at least any place that was clear. It's just absolutely amazing. According to the Chinese 5-element astrology calendar, 2012 is the year of the water dragon. Water in the 5-element system is related to black. 2012 is a black dragon, water dragon, or black water dragon year. And of course the capsule that supplies the space station is called a dragon as well. Some interesting coincidences. One of the other terrible things that happened, of course, on a much smaller scale is HMS Bounty. I guess we could call it CS because it was made in Canada. Foundered in the storm. They went to sea. We see them in some high waves on the 28th riding out the storm. The crew at a Halloween party on the 18th from their Facebook page. The captain was lost, so was one of the young lady in the crew. The most amazing bit of coincidence for that is the woman who died was a direct descendant of Fletcher Christian. And there's a picture at another storm and another sea, so the ship was well laid out for this sort of thing. But this is the picture that I find most interesting. Gary Bell talked about that on his show on Mojo Radio, but he didn't know about this. This is from their Facebook page as well. October the 25th, U.S. Navy and HMS Bounty crew in today's sail. So the United States Navy, for one reason or another, had a whole lot of sailors deployed to this ship, HMS Bounty. Don't know why exactly, but a very, very, very strange set of affairs. It's just not like, you know, they do private work for all kinds of people at the drop of a hat, unless they were doing some special work, perhaps putting up some special equipment on Bounty because they knew she'd be taking to sea to ride out the storm. And what if, lo and behold, she was carrying something that would attract various particle beams from space, or something that would be an anchor to heart patterns in the ocean? Because this storm just kind of like really lingered in the ocean. And a lot of times when you want to control something, you want to control it from above and below. What if they equipped Bounty with some sort of equipment? And this is a conspiracy theory. So that she would be the bottom of the command and control structure. And then when she was overwhelmed and sank, the storm was free to move inland and wreak havoc upon the coast. Just very, very unusual that a private venture would have so many naval sailors involved. I think I have another picture here that we can open if we can. And this was the lady who was lost, Claudine Christian. That's a glam shot from her recorded music. There's some YouTube versions around that, you know, aren't professionally recorded or anything, just, you know, hamming it up a little bit. But she went down with the ship. She missed getting into the life raft. So she seemed to be a very interesting person, typical American girl, cheerleader, businesswoman to a degree, crew member on HMS Bounty, lost at sea, one of the victims of Sandy. quite unfortunate. But that's just the way of the world. Frequently there are many things that are just too unfortunate. The New Yorker magazine had this giant cover of New York with the power out. Just a spectacular photograph. Of course, it probably didn't look all that great to people on the ground because you know, you're suffering in the dark or just plain suffering, but we see what areas were affected by this power outage. And I guess that is the beauty of photography. It is absolutely amazing what we can do with our cameras. And as a shot, that definitely is an amazing one. But life goes on, the conspiracies go on, and we still have to deal with them. Many things aren't going to be talked about in the election or in the election roundup. Perhaps some of the election roundup is just cover for the ill-gotten leaders we have. One's pending and one's employed. Someone has gone a little farther. We talked about Rear Admiral Gayout being relieved of command. He wasn't the only one. Turns out 2 senior military men were relieved of command. He was one of them. And this one goes even further to say we had General Carter Ham, commanding officer of AFRICOM, actually arrested and relieved of command. The firing of Task Force Commander Rear Admiral Charles M. Gayout. Their postings were so sensitive and senior, replacements require approval from the Senate. Both men, according to this author, were attempting to rescue Ambassador Stevens and were told to stand down by Defense Secretary Leon Panetta. He implies that this is proof Obama knew in advance of this attack. They denied the begging Stevens more protection and allowed him to be killed, which pretty much implies that they killed him. General Ham had activated a special forces team within minutes of learning that the embassy, which was really a CIA safe house, was under attack. He received his stand-down orders from Obama. He planned to go ahead with the rescue and was arrested within minutes of contravening an order by the president. His second-in-command, General Rodriguez, took over. Admiral Gayout was commander of Carrier Strike Group 3. He was preparing to provide intelligence and air cover for General Ham's rescue team in violation of standing orders, and he was promptly relieved of command. Of course, all the big news media could never make statements like that or even come to grips with even pointing in the general direction of something like this. General Ham was in command of the initial 2011 U.S. NATO military intervention in Libya. There's been a growing internal conflict with the White House and U.S. military leaders. This author is concerned that if Obama's re-elected, that may become worse. They could have stopped the mortar fire that killed these people. Panetta and Obama blocked any rescue attempt. Corporate-controlled media refuses to cover the events in Benghazi like this. Then another story came out about U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens having jihadist Syrian rebels in his Rolodex file of one sort or another. That he was a senior arms dealer for the CIA, brokered arms deals with Al-Qaeda and their affiliates, rebels in Syria and Libya. That he was the link between the CIA and Al-Qaeda, and that he could tell the American public quite a lot. And he was not permitted to do so. At least that's in this author's opinion. It's generally understood that almost everybody who's working for the American power structure is supplying weapons to some sort of insurgent or another, and almost everybody's connected to Al-Qaeda, or Al-Qaeda as it's called. So maybe that's not the big issue, maybe that's just a cover story. I think the big issue is he knows who got the money, and he knows where it's going, and maybe he didn't get enough, but the people that did get enough are taking him out. He was Hillary Clinton's translator. He knew everything. Everything. Dead men tell no tales. So I think it's probably more than that. And maybe if this author knew that he was Hillary Clinton's translator and that Sean was another person in State Department for a long, long time, and he knew everything as well, including the fact he was going to be killed that day. So seemingly, anyway, they gave 20,000 handheld Stinger missiles to these Al-Qaeda forces. Be prepared to duck and cover. They allege, too, that that's why Panetta was shot at by American troops while he was in Afghanistan. That's why they sacked General McChrystal, because he was disrespectful to the commander-in-chief. And I guess that just goes without saying if you're a man of honor in the military. He recommends that all these people be charged with treason, conspiracy to commit treason, first-degree murder, violating Trading with the Enemy Act. Can't disagree with that. So of course he means Obama, Clinton, and Panetta. He also includes General Rodriguez and makes light of the fact that Obama did put up Operation Fast and Furious that killed a U.S. Border Patrol agent, Brian Terry. And now we're up to the election with the battle of the voting machines. Another loss of life happened that adds a lot to the conspiracy angle. U.S. Secret Service agent killed himself. He was on President Barack Obama's security detail. He was found dead in his car with allegations of perhaps being carbon monoxide poisoning. Modern cars are a little better, a little cleaner. It's a lot harder to kill yourself with carbon monoxide poisoning than the old clunkers we used to have. So we wonder if this poor chap had some help. Special Agent Rafael Pareto is supposed to have been involved in a romantic relationship with a woman from Mexico. He's supposed to be a married father. His wife left him some time ago, so it's really no big deal that he was, finding a replacement. But in light of the Cartagena scandal with Secret Service agents, they are required to report these things. Of course, Source of Fall from whatisitmean.com, which is a major disinformation source, is saying that this agent's wife is a Hollywood producer who made the movie about the capture of bin Laden and was privy to state secrets and had been to the White House to meet with people there, and that was the basis for his demise. I think it's bigger and deeper than that. This is old news and an old story now. I think he overheard the plans about the weather war, that we were deploying a new Pearl Harbor on the East Coast. I'd say that was the clear and present danger. He may have been willing to risk his life to tell the American people, just like Ambassador Stevens appeared to be prepared to tell people. But there's another man who didn't have to report, his liaison with a foreign national. And we'll see if that comes up in a timely manner. If it doesn't, I guess I can always hold the picture up. This one's called Romney's Cuban Bond Girl. There we go. An intelligence photo of Mitt Romney coming out of an airplane with his enchilada in 1999. This woman is not just a Cuban. Her last name is a Russian. Maria Perez Andropov Cuban-Russian intelligence agent. That they had their liaisons, both traveling with diplomatic passports. Yum yum. I get the feeling we've been had here. So seemingly they had a meeting with Raul and Fidel Castro, including Mitt Romney, that he regularly meets with these people. So for people who think he's an honest, upfront guy, you know, he's just another snake in the grass. Here's a copy of the Cuban intelligence report talking about this stuff. Discussions are not limited to drug trafficking, money laundering, currency, and human trafficking into the United States of America. One of the other things that came as an addendum to this is some of the links down here. Romney's top advisor, Dov Zakheim, connected to 9/11. That's one of the big ones that I put the wooden stake into the heart of this turkey for. He was the guy who worked for the company that made the flight termination system that could take control of 4 to 6 aircraft in flight from either on the ground or in the air and direct them accordingly into various buildings and structures. He was also the comptroller for the Department of Defense, so that he wouldn't be looking for the missing trillions of dollars. And I guess nobody'd be looking for them because they aimed this missile into the Pentagon and killed the people in the accounting department and burned up the records that they had been working on. So we can see that the whole concept of 9/11 is a plot from the highest levels of the administration to steal from the American people, to change the American people into a police state that they control with extreme prejudice, extreme loss of life. And so many people just eat this stuff up. It's a terrible shame. A terrible shame, but it's a shame you can stop by changing the channel. Come to that channel, come to Conspiracy Cafe, chip in a few pesos here and there, and we will shed light on the corruption and the problems that are facing the world. One dusted off one of my old books. It's a trilogy written by Arthur M. Schlesinger Jr., The Crisis of the Old Order. So I would heartily recommend you get the trilogy and read into this, because where we're going economically is basically, you know, a repeat of where we've been before. There is nothing new, really. It's just no one ever looks at history to see what we've gone through before. And one of the things I really liked as I was going through this, based on the assassination attempt on the president-elect story I'm going to come up with, but this one really tells us a lot about the economic crisis we're facing, and gets into what's called the underconsumptionist theory. The failure of business to pass on the gains of improved productivity, either through higher wages or lower prices, had caused a deficit of purchasing power, which made depression inevitable. You know, somebody could go to school and learn about that one. So giving is blessed. By giving higher wages or lower prices to the proletariat, the unwashed masses, it is a benefit to everyone, including the elite rich, and it stops the economy from going down the toilet. Who'd have thunk? Who'd have thunk? The underconsumptionist theory. Because nobody's buying. And that's why we're going into this trail. We'll talk a little bit about money, I'm hoping, this show. I keep having to putting it off. But the big thing is, it's the lender of last resort. You, Joe taxpayer. You're the one who's got to spend. They always make you and shake you when Wall Street screws up. But ultimately, it's for you. But one thing that I just found absolutely amazing is I picked up a lot of videos, and almost every one I got really tells you something. We got into the Mormon one about the massacre. That one was a godly gift. Well, one I got before was the clearing out stores. Zellers is going down the tubes here. They had a giant sale, so I bought a couple of these discs on the Untouchables for peanuts, and I was watching these things because I don't have TV, and lo and behold, they talked about one that involved the assassination or attempted assassination of the president-elect, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, probably the most popular president in American history. And I was just absolutely mortified. Never heard about this. But like all good history, they sweep it down the memory hole and we don't get to find out. This happened on February the 15th, 1933. The episode was called The Unhired Assassin. It was a relatively accurate depiction of the classic unbalanced lone gunman, Manchurian candidate kind of guy, just that you'd see anywhere. The patsy, the fall guy. So because we study so many murders and assassinations, this stuff's like old hat. So we see the patterns, we see the trick, we know the play-by-play. We could be the coach any time in this game. It's just absolutely spellbinding. And it's going to be like, 80 years since this happened. So really the intended target was the mayor of Chicago, Anton Cermak. He was traveling to Miami to make amends with FDR. And that wasn't working out too well. In fact, it didn't work out too well at all for him because he ultimately died out of this. Famous reporter of the day, news legend Walter Winchell, said it was a conspiracy, that they were really after him and it wasn't an attempt on FDR. Crime author Ronald Humble alleged that Cermak was trying to rub out gangster Frank Nitti, and these guys decided to take him out. And everybody talked about, even in the Kennedy assassination, how the mob was involved. Here's the lone nut bar assassin here, Giuseppe Zangara, with his newspapers. He'd buy these newspapers and have all these bizarre fantasies. He had these pains, and the only way to get rid of the pains was to kill the president. At the time, he didn't really care which one. First, he was going to kill Hoover, and then when Hoover lost his election and FDR came into power, he changed his mind to go after him. So they say. He stood fascinated outside a pawn shop, bought a .32 caliber pistol, was all ready. He lived with no fixed assets, so maybe somebody was bankrolling him. And then maybe these newspapers worked like the Queen of Diamonds in the Manchurian. He said in Italy 10 years before he wanted to pop King Emmanuel, but he just didn't get around to it. I guess he didn't have a good enough pawn shop to buy a pistol. Those are his mug shots. And then all kinds of little things that bother you, like Columbo used to say, come into play in this, that just really take the odds of this up so you can kind of look at to see that this guy definitely is the fall guy. The president-elect traveled with his brain trust, a group of professors from various places who were really the shadow government. This term brain trust is just a nice happy-go-lucky way to say shadow government, and that really FDR is just nothing more than a figurehead. Well, one of them was Raymond Moley. I don't know if that's where the term holy moly came from my youth and before. But Moley wrote FDR speeches up to 1936. He coined the term New Deal. He was there that night. He was driving in the car behind the president with Vincent Astor of the famous money trust company, the Astor family. The father of Vincent was killed in the infamous RMS Titanic. We can't call it Titanic really because it was really the Olympic, as we have in our video section. We've played that video on the Titanic anniversary. It's something to really, really pay attention to because it shows you the fine, dark arts of murder and changing things around and manipulating the story. But these battles between these money trusts, just like today, we have two competing mafias competing for president, and they had them back then as well. They fight with casualties. The Astors bankrolled the Roosevelt machine. He was on Astor's yacht, the Nur Mahal. They joked about fishing. There's a nice picture of the yacht. It's tough to be poor. So while driving behind in this car, they were actually debating and talking about the risks of assassination on open streets. What a coincidence. So the problem with these open cars is the words were heard and the bullets can get in, as Mr. Kennedy learned too. Just one of those 1 in a billion odds. Moley had another, even more bizarre history in assassination. He was at the assassination of President William McKinley in 1901. So I find that really hard to believe that you can be at a shooting with the president-elect and have been at McKinley shooting. McKinley was shot by a lone nut bar assassin as well, and the guy was a little bit off balance, had a pistol, followed him from a newspaper clipping and all this sort of thing. Very similar type of thing. But the most bizarre thing, of course, there are no real pictures, so this just came from the Untouchables, is the classic Manchurian thing. So instead of the Queen of Diamonds, a man comes to the president and Mr. Cermak with this giant telegram welcoming him to Miami. So this is like the set-off card for our nut bar to get up and start blasting a few rounds, or maybe he was even shooting blanks. But I would suspect that this giant telegram would cover the real assassin so that he could shoot Cermak. And the president had absolutely nothing to fear, and that's why he didn't drive away. His driver wanted to take him away, but he told him to stop and to stay in the danger zone, which is totally against all protocol for security of a VIP. As soon as the shots are fired, you're out of there, because you don't know if there are more in the wings. But they did know, I'm thinking, and that's why they stayed. So Cermak bled onto FDR. They pulled him into the car, took him to the hospital. One of the other big things that works in their favor in those days, of course, is the flash from a camera, the flash guns. Just as I was working on this Untouchables episode, of course, I was very fortunate to freeze it at the exact second of the flash. So you're completely blinded. You can't see anything. You can't see the muzzle flashes. The light has blinded a lot of the witnesses. There's a giant telegram, has covered many, many things. It's just very, very easy to get away with it. And this is from the Untouchables again. Cermak is shot. And we say, see, conspiracy. FDR was adamant that he wouldn't allow any of the pre-Chicago Democrats into his administration. Absolutely didn't even want them mentioned. When told about this, Eleanor Roosevelt remarked, "These things are to be expected." It's a pretty calm, relaxed point of view to somebody almost took out your husband. Then when Zangara was arrested, Moley attended the interrogation. FDR was the president-elect. Moley had no official capacity in the administration because it hadn't even been formed yet. Nobody's been sworn in. Yet he goes and sits in on this and actually tries to cover up the fact that there was no one else involved, that it was just a lone nut bar assassin. Moley was on the National Commission of Law Observance and Enforcement. A regular contributor to that was J. Edgar Hoover, head of the Bureau of Investigation and hatchet man in the Kennedy assassination. So you can see they take their jobs very, very seriously. Another individual who was a publisher back then in the day was Robert H. Gore. Of course, we had another Gore vying to be president in Florida many generations later with a big conflict with the Bushes, because whatever button you pushed, it voted for Bush. And then in the modern era, we had a publisher who had a wife who rented out rooms to Muhammad Atta and changed history. It's a very small world. Roosevelt never spoke about the matter again, and probably no one around Roosevelt spoke about the matter again, because you'd think all through history you'd say, yes, President Roosevelt, and he survived his assassination attempt in 1933 before he was even sworn in. Just down the memory hole, under the carpet. He sailed on Asterjat to Nur Mahal every year. This is a picture of Raymond Moley, Time magazine man in his day, the Brain Trust. Very interesting stuff. As you learn about all these assassinations, see, we never learned about a lot of these, so it's just not, just something that we can really relate to in any way, shape, or form. And it's too bad, because it's the same stuff over and over and over and over again. There's not too many new tricks. Usually they're all the same old ones. Part of the same old ones is our leaders are thieves. They steal everything that isn't nailed down. A story we never had a chance to get into here for local politics here in Ontario is our Premier Dalton McGuinty, who we like to call McGuilty, has resigned. He's proroguing Parliament, so no one can ask any questions about where did the money go. You see it? It's like $1 billion. So at least he's nicer than Cheney and the Bushites and stuff. He's not getting an airplane to crash into where the accountants are and blow the living snot out of them. No, he just resigned. You really got to have your hand so far in the cookie jar that it almost cuts it off before you see these politicians resign. He resigned. Now we're going to pick some other loser to take his place or something like that. So what he did was, to get elected in the last election, they had a couple of controversial ridings where they would have went Liberal, because he's a Liberal Party guy, if they got rid of the hydro generating plants that they wanted to build. So they entered into a contract with these plants through Ontario Power Authority with a company called TransCanada Energy. So they canceled these contracts, left these people high and dry, and moved stuff out. It was supposed to cost $40-something million to do this. The price tag just keeps going up and up and up and up. All the documents are kind of like half-assed secret and stuff like that. They released a whole bunch that isn't too good, but the smoking gun ones aren't there. There's 56,000 pages of documents, mostly unreadable. So just canceling this Oakville plant, it's going to cost $1 billion, and then the one in Mississauga, another couple of few $100,000. So this TransCanada Energy wants to sue the government for breach of contract. So far, the out-of-court settlement that the government has offered is somewhere, the worst-case scenario is they're looking at $750 million of our money. This company wants $90 million. And by the time it ever gets worked out, you know, this is going to be like 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, maybe 1.5 billion dollars. All the big law firms in Toronto are all lining up to get into the game here in case it does go to a lawsuit. But the one thing is, we don't have a government. We have no way to ask questions about this because McGuilty has left us high and dry. It's just, you know, like if I lost over $1 billion at work, I think my boss would, you know, be sending me up to the International Space Station with his boot. But the collective idiots that are the taxpayers just sleep and slumber. You know, it's just $1 billion and something dollars. I'll go to work some more for that to pay the bills. I'll pay more for electricity for that. Doesn't bother me. We did have some good news for people under the boot in the gun control. They destroyed the records of the gun registry, so they say, unless they're lying. Public Safety Minister Vic Towes didn't put out a press release. Nobody else did either, but they say they were destroyed on Halloween night, and all these files are gone up in smoke or little electrons floating somewhere. And we're back to square one, which is wonderful. A little bit of freedom for we, the people. It's like the first step backwards off the slippery slope in a long, long time. It says here, Canada is almost alone internationally in rolling back gun control laws because they don't work. There's only one purpose to gun control. That is to oppress you and take you apart. So the people who steal all our money can sleep well, maybe not worrying as much about the fact that they may get shot by some angry ratepayer. Winnipeg police are giving out a Pixels for Pistols program, copying the Americans, where you get an amnesty to turn in a working gun or exchange even a non-working firearm or a replica firearm for a gift certificate to buy a digital camera. And what do you give away with that? You give away your freedom. Because the power of state should rest in the hands of we the people, and for beads and trinkets. He'll give it away. Press TV launches a Facebook petition to save the news channel in Europe. So because they're Iranian and they have lots of good shows and they tell you a lot of stuff that corporate media won't tell you here in our part of the world, the Europeans just want to flush them down the toilet and not allow them to speak. See, no one's allowed to speak. You can't have a third party or fourth or fifth or sixth party point of view and get the opportunity to address a mass audience. They tell you a lot of good stuff on this press TV, like when the war's going to start and such. One of the big articles today, too, is it's overshadowed by the election, but Netanyahu's making it quite clear. I'm pushing the button. I don't care who gets elected. I'm pushing the button. And he's got to do it before his election in case they boot him out. That's January 22nd. So we have an intervening period here where, you know, if Obama gets elected, well, he'll still be president if he's a dead duck, and we got to wait for the president-elect. This turkey's ready to push the button. Another good reason to be prepared. Have as much as you can have where you can have it. It's not going to be pretty. So one of the big plans that came out from back in the old days when they had books like this, it's called the Chicago Plan Revisited. That's something you can Google and look up. Some of the articles I have here. This was a re-report of the International Monetary Fund people finding out that back in the 30s they had ideas. Some of them were pretty good. They can have nation states print their own money. Who'd have thunk it? And get the banksters out of the debt philosophy that we're trapped in. The advantages are, would slash private debt by 100% of the gross domestic product, boost growth, stabilize prices, dethrone bankers, all at the same time, done cleanly and painlessly. So you wouldn't want that, would you? You'd rather go down with the ship and pay taxes for the privilege. Replacing our system of private bank-created money, 90% of the money supply with state-created money. We return to the historical norm before Charles II placed control of the money supply in private hands with the English Free Coinage Act of 1666. And if you don't know what happened to Charles II, he put his head on the chopping block and cut it off. So some people weren't too happy with that. The assault on fractional reserve banking. Lenders would be forced to put up 100% reserves backing deposits instead of close to zero, as it is now. They would lose the exorbitant privilege of creating money out of thin air. There'd have to be something behind it. The nation regains sovereign control over the money supply. No more bank runs, fewer boom and bust credit cycles. This report was written by Jeremy Benes and Michael Kumhoff, came out in August. It's acquiring a cult following around the planet Earth. The original Chicago Plan was written by Professors Henry Simmons and Irving Fisher in 1936. Irving Fisher thought credit cycles led to an unhealthy concentration of wealth, which is what we're seeing. Creditors foreclosed on destitute farmers, seizing their land or buying it for a pittance at the bottom of the cycle, which happened before. If you go back to Willie Nelson Farm Aid days, the local farmers all banded together, put all their equipment around so the people couldn't come in and foreclose on the farmers. Well, this happened again back in the 30s. Farmers found that they would muscle out anybody who tried to take these properties. They call them carpetbaggers. They just take them aside and beat the snot out of them. They had $1 auctions, they were called. So you'd buy your neighbor's property for $1 and give it back to him. Perfect. Fight for your neighbor like you'd fight for yourself. These people can't take advantage of us. These credit cycle traumas caused by private money creation goes back deep into history. It also goes back into things called debt jubilees, or ancient religions had things about harvest cycles and systemic defaults even thousands of years ago. But the big thing about the debt jubilee is it just forgives everyone of their debt and you start over. As if that's going to happen in this world right now. So there's a lot of stuff in here about ancient history. Athenian leader Solon implemented the first known Chicago Plan deal in 599 BC to relieve farmers and hock to oligarchs enjoying private coinage. He canceled debts, restituted land seized by creditors, set floor prices for commodities, consciously flooded the money supply with state-issued debt-free coinage. And coins are debt-free because they have the value in the coin and the precious metals of them. We use this paper crap that has no value. But this money can be created tax-free and debt-free. It's created as an asset, not a liability. There's something that nobody talks about, maybe nobody understands because they haven't had time to think of it that way, but in many aspects of science we talk about quantum mechanics. The things can be like two things at the same time in the same place, which is a very hard concept to follow for a lot of people. I believe we can also have quantum economics, where we can have money existing in several different planes. It can exist as an asset and a liability both at the same time. Something could be money and a commodity both at the same time. Where usually one person will just sit on one side of the fence or the other side of the fence, not realizing that just like many other things in the universe, they can exist as a quanta. So can money. Gold can be an asset, it can be money. It can be a commodity. Both at the same time. A quanta. The debt and the asset, money created by the nation state, can be the same thing too, at the same time. Kennedy flooded treasury notes at the same time the Fed had notes out too. So you had two different types of money existing at the same time. Quanta, paying off the debt with the state-issued money. Brilliant. One of the other long-term effects is something that I haven't heard from a long time. They just say there'd be a 10% boost in the long-arm economic output. That's called the balanced budget multiplier. Supporters are really big on this, and so am I. The trouble is we're facing economic warfare. We're being choked for power and control to get political objectives. And that's why nobody's spending. It would devastate bank profits, so they're going to not be in favor of it. Cause a massive deflationary disaster, some people say. I doubt that very much. And that they need some sort of quantitative easing to get it going again. But it would change the nature of Western capitalism. That's for sure. And then we also present the other side. Technocracy in the IMF, new global monetary system. This guy says, beware, I smell a rat. Well, I smell a rat too. Everything he talks about is IMF, World Bank, and United Nations. I smell him as the rat. And I look at this as being a very good idea. So he says, back in the day when they came up with this plan, in the 30s, banks did not own the various nations of the world so that they could summarily dictate public policy. I would have to heartily disagree with that and say this man is in need of some serious re-education, because the banksters have always owned the governments and much about it. He says gold is not in the immediate picture of monetary policy, and I don't think he really understands the quantum effects of gold or precious metals. But he does understand energy, and he says this is where you get into the United Nations crap, that you can sell energy credits, and that can be money, because that serves the elite oligarchy. And of course he quotes the United Nations, and the green economy replaced the current brown economy with a fossil fuel-based economy. And we know that fuel isn't fossil. It couldn't be enough bones of dead animals to do that. Then it quotes a United Nations report about using the green economy, decoupling of resource use, environmental impacts from economic growth, public and private debts settled with that. Disagree. The economy grows when spending occurs for goods and services. There are three types of spending: personal, business, and government. Businesses and poisons aren't spending that much. So that's why it's inherent upon government to spend. And what are the banksters doing? They're telling the governments they can't spend. So basically, everybody's had their throat slit. Lending, borrowing activity did not pick up after interest rates were dropped to almost zero. There's some big reasons for that. The stimulus and quantitative easing programs directed to get the government to spend have a $16 trillion national debt and virtually nothing to show for it. The economy has not recovered. Jobs have not returned. It's like you're oxygen-starved, sucking for air. And there's two big reasons for that. One is this quantitative easing, these bailouts, they didn't go to the lender of last resort, the taxpayer. They went to the big banksters to steal the money for themselves, or big corporations. They got the money and took off with it. They didn't spend it. They salted it away. So it didn't do anything. That's why it didn't do anything. And what do these banksters do? They use drugs. They jump in the hot tub with the silicon babes. They're having a grand old time. But as far as doing anything for the masses of people, no. One of the big things these idiots don't understand too, by lowering the interest rate is like putting you on life support. So to have an interest rate close to zero is you're on life support. Can you run a race on life support? No. You just lie there like a piece of wet linguine until you die. And that's what this is going to do. Because people who have money invested don't get any returns. And because they don't get any returns, that's why people aren't spending. Talk to any senior citizen who's trying to live by on accumulated wealth that they have in investments. They're getting very low rates of return, if they're getting any rates of return at all. There's absolutely no sense to this policy. It is choking, starving the oxygen. And then there's something else that runs in parallel with the bank rate that these idiots don't seem to understand. It's just as important, just as effective, and this is the equivalent of maybe like a 12 or 15% bank rate. Called the price of fuel at the pumps. Everything exists in the modern era based on fuel. And because fuel is so expensive, it's the equivalent of having a very high bank rate. Because all the disposable income of people goes into heating their homes, putting into their car for transportation purposes. It's taking most of the chunk of your disposable income. You pay your bills, you pay for your roof over your head, pay your car loan or whatever, but by and large, when it comes left, you got a little bit of disposable income, it's all taken away. There's nothing for you to spend anything on or to travel and go other places. It's been a long time since I got in a car and really hustled to go somewhere because it's just too damn expensive. And all my money's going to go into paying for the fuel. I can't really go anywhere and, take a hotel room or enjoy myself or do this, so you just stay home. They call it staycations. That's oxygen starving the people. Price of fuel's got to go down quite a lot to make up for this choking effect. And the interest rate should be going up. It's also a corrective action to stop people from getting into a debt crisis. It's a natural seesaw. Right? You're starting to get into too much debt. Well, when the rate goes up, you just go, oh, well, I'm not borrowing all that kind of money. And then they talk about credit cards and the fact that credit card debt has gone down. And then this guy says, well, it's because companies wrote off debts. They give out credit cards to anybody and everybody. I won't embarrass people, but from some of the things I've seen, but I'll tell you one thing that I have from my own history is they gave a credit card to my daughter when she was 18 months old, and it had a higher limit than her mother's. Not a whole lot of thinking going on there. So most people are living bloated lifestyles. That's a personal choice and a personal responsibility, and something you should take responsibility for. So I guess we'll play our video here on the economy and let somebody else do the talking for a while. Let's get this puppy going.
We warned you that something was wrong.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
That investigations were needed.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word, for the third time today.
That our liberties were under attack. That the very fabric of our republic was being ripped apart.
Report suspicious activity.
And as a nation, we turned our back on our values, our principles, and our moral obligations. We allowed torture, we encouraged war, and we slept well as our nation was raped.
Will you tell the American people to whom you lent $2.2 trillion of their dollars?
Hundreds and hundreds of banks, any bank that has access to the U.S. Federal Reserve's discount.
Tell us who they are.
No.
Now, the day of reckoning is nearly upon us, and still, we warn you.
We're heading for a hyperinflationary depression.
This is the madness of a lost society. Final warnings.
Well, we're heading for hyperinflation. The hard choices should have been made years ago.
The Federal Reserve is borrowing $100 billion every 30 days.
You could cut every penny of government spending, except for Social Security and Medicare, and you'd still be in deficit.
The end game is everybody has zero purchasing power currency.
Does this scare you? It ought to scare the pants off of you.
The U.S. will be defaulting on its debt in the next 5 years because the numbers are so staggering.
The world is going to go into a hyperinflationary depression everywhere.
We have to have the deficit under control now if we want to avoid a hyperinflation. It's not going to happen.
And there will be a global run to hard assets, and it has already begun.
I'm not saying this to scare you. Quite to the contrary.
The government doesn't have the ability to raise taxes to pay for its needs, so what it does is it prints money. It gives you inflation, eventually a hyperinflation. The U.S. dollar becomes worthless.
I want you to prepare and spare yourself heartache and save your dinner table. That's the only reason I'm telling you these things, not to keep you awake at night.
My contention now is that we're beyond control, we're beyond containment.
The world has never seen what they're going to see.
People ask me this, well, when is it all going to start? But the question I ask you in return is, what's it going to take for you to notice it's happening?
There's nothing they can do to prevent a hyperinflation here and an ultimate economic collapse. They know it.
The elite want America to collapse. I have been told this.
They're just buying time. They're trying to push the bad news off as far as they can into the future.
Would you like to know exactly what's going to happen so that you can spare your assets?
Because the fact of the matter is, it's already unraveling.
The deficit of $4 to $5 trillion. Let's say the government wanted to resolve the issue with taxes. It could raise personal income taxes to take 100% of individual income. It could take 100% of corporate profits, and you'd still be in deficit.
If you look at the price of silver, for example, the low in silver was around $7 an ounce during the 2008 crisis. Silver recently touched $30. There is no explanation for the move in silver outside of a global move away from the dollar. And that is absolutely happening. It's happening right now.
As interest rates rise, the interest expense goes up, causing a bigger deficit, causing the government to borrow more, causing the Federal Reserve to do additional quantitative easing, further debasing the dollar and ultimately meaning higher gold and silver prices.
The dollar is going to have a severe sell-off at some point here, a panic sell-off, and along with that you're going to see a sharp spike in precious metals as they tend to preserve the purchasing power of the dollars that go into them.
The how-to stuff is actually pretty simple. You want to own energy, agriculture, and sound money.
He said, get out of anything that is paper. Now, do you realize what that means?
Unfortunately, my experience has been people won't take simple steps to protect themselves because they can't imagine the future changing as much as it's going to.
You've got to make preparations right now.
This quantitative easing, official debasement of the U.S. dollar, is beginning to have its effect.
If you look at the amount of money that's been created over the last 5 years, to accomplish a 10% gold-backed currency, the price of gold would have to be around $10,000 an ounce.
There's nothing they can do that's going to turn this economy around. Shy of shutting down the entitlement system, there's nothing they're going to do to prevent the hyperinflation.
Believe me, they're going to make you pay through the nose. They're going to make you pay in ways you haven't even imagined yet.
Again, watch out for panic selling of the dollar, because that's going to trigger all sorts of unpleasant realities. people realize the end is getting near.
How big does America's annual budget deficit have to get before you begin to question the solvency of the government? How much total debt can the economy hold before you begin to question whether or not it can be repaid? How high do the price of gold and silver have to go before you realize that something is already happening? How many new rules and restrictions on trade and capital and finance will have to be implemented before you finally realize that you're screwed?
We are now living on borrowed time, and because America has turned its back on what made it great, we are now about to reap what we have sown, and your time to prepare for the economic storm that is coming is almost out. Thanks for watching The Madness of a Lost Society. Final warnings.
Okay, so we see from this video, we're up against the wall. It's going to be a world like you've never known before. There's a major lawsuit going on. Somebody's trying to get back the $43 trillion in TARP money the banksters took. This case is going out by Spire Law Group, LLP. It's named everybody from the president on down in this lawsuit. Of course, you don't hear about that in mainstream media. RBC is being pulled into, that's Royal Bank of Canada, being pulled into the LIBOR probe. 6 Canadian banks are on review for a Moody's downgrade because basically they don't have anything. Sooner or later, it's going to come down. You got to be responsible for you. We got a little surprise this week where the Bank of Montreal systems went down for about 24 hours. You can't use any of your cards. You can't take out any money. After a while, you could take out $100. And we have this website that I like a lot, Zero Hedge, I believe it's called, talking about the fact that we could be approaching a flash crash very, very soon. And if we do, you're going to get burned, and you're going to get burned hard, because this thing, it isn't going to be like the storm where it lingers for days on end. This is his graph of the way, what he calls the NX Core Filter Level 6, counting the NMS stocks and prices. It's just going like a ping pong ball, back and forth, back and forth. Here was off the scale for the last crash. We're getting back up there again. It could just be a matter of time before it happens. Because it's a flash crash, it's just going to happen right away. You won't know what hit you. Then another chap who sells gold and precious metals has put out something called Critical Warning Number 6. That, you know, hey, baby, it's here. Get yourself prepared or get wiped out. The Hungarians have told the IMF and people to go to hell. There was a private bank that isn't covered by, you know, these insurance plans in Australia called Banksia. They went under. People lost their shirts. $660 million in assets was frozen. So Hungary is threatened by the IMF and the bond rating agency Fitch to tell them try not to do it without the IMF. But Hungary just says very, very clearly, life will go on. And you know what? Life will go on. We don't need them. We can work around them. We can even get back to a barter system. We can change. The big thing is be prepared. Whatever you think you need, you can never have enough of it, whether it be food, water, the critical infrastructure, heat. Be prepared. And then it's just going to be like a walk in the park. Might not be a comfortable walk in the park, but it'll be a walk in the park. And one of the big things you can do, of course, is to help out shows like this, Conspiracy Cafe, here at that channel. Hit the donate button, mail in whatever you can mail in. All kinds of little pieces add up. Don't be ashamed. A couple of dollar notes times 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 turn into a chunk of change. We just keep stuffing it in the drawer until we got something to yodel with. Okay? If you're a big financier and you can help out that channel, help them out. It's the alternative media that are going to save your life. How much would you pay for a life preserver if you're going down to Davy Jones's locker? Everything. Because your only alternative is to go down to Davy Jones's locker. There's no coming back. So if you're a big roller, roll something this way. I'm sure Randy wouldn't mind one bit. Keep it alive. It's our joint collective survival that you're paying for or investing in. We do our best. Aaron's here late at night. I'm here late at night, working a 12-hour day and then coming here to do this. It's the only way out. We'll see what happens in the election. Either way, it's a lose-lose proposition because nobody changed enough to go for the alternative candidates. So with Obama, you might have economic crisis first, war second. With Romney, you might get war first and economic crisis second. The big thing is, it's going to be the ride of the century. Come here again next week. Stay tuned, and we'll take you on the ultimate thrill ride. From the International Space Station to the bottom of the ocean. We follow the clues and tell you how to get by. Come again. Same that time, same that channel. Conspiracy Cafe, I'm your host, George Freund. Good night.
About the crime, no one looks behind the curtain, and no one questions why. The only time we got is right about now. I cross my heart, I take the vow, I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Tonight's the test, tonight's the time. I am the punishment that fits the crime. I'll break the bricks, I'll pick the locks. I don't got nothing, but I'll give what I got. I'll never turn, I'll never bend. I'm with you now until the end. Trials whose outcomes all fixed from the start. 9 judges sitting counting their money in the dark. 8 towers of iron surround the desert town. On a cold December morning, 7 martyrs knocked them down. 6 fathers still waiting for their 6 sons to come home. 5 mothers who know better and accept that they're gone. 4 years I've been hunted, still I breathe free. 3 times I shot the sheriff and did not spare the deputy.